So, you know, what you're doing is amazing, and not only in this foundation, but also what you young people are demonstrating. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because this is about having courage. Okay, this is about having courage. When you think about what Donald Trump, you know, right here, right? I mean, that unbelievable. And I'm not sure if this is probably the first time that somebody's actually used this room, maybe. Huh? Maybe. It probably is for an event like this. When you think about what Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, and his family endured over the last 18 months plus, I mean, you can just count down the number of organizations and people on both sides of both sides of sort of the electorate, right, on the establishment side. This was not an election. This was a revolution. This was a revolution. And I have been doing this a bit for him. One of the things that occurred in this revolution is and I was just talking to Attorney General Meese about this. This was a digital election because the media, the normal media, 99% of the media, was not on Donald Trump's side, was not on President-elect Trump's side. I mean, you saw the bombardment, the constant barrage and attacks every single day. I was with him one time, and we're flying somewhere, and you know, we're flipping through the channels on his plane, and like every single channel we went to, it was him. It was a negative, you know, thing about him. But he's like, God, you can't get better press than this. You know, that was unbelievable. I mean, why not? So he says, why the hell should I spend a dime on ads? Right? I mean, and what happened was, he knew. And think about this. Think about this. He's essentially, you know, he was a real estate developer. Real estate developer. And in real estate, you find underappreciated real estate, you buy it, you develop it, and you sell it at a higher price. Make some money, right? You find underappreciated real estate. And he did that very well, you know, for his whole life pretty much. Many of the things that he was involved in. What he put his finger on was tens of millions of people in this country who felt deeply underappreciated by our government, by Washington, D.C. And he did it in a way that nobody saw. He did it in a way that you know, everybody said, oh, you know, this is a flash in the pan. This guy's a joke. Okay? And when you think about what he achieved, this is, and actually I was just in fact, I was just going through social media, because social media is the only thing that's reporting it. And I was just telling the folks at my table that he won the Electoral College, obviously. The final count right now is he got 306 to 232, but they are now reporting. Now, the media is not reporting this. This is being reported in social media. Okay, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about social media, because there's so much power in social media for your generation, for your generation. So it's being reported now, and it's flying around in social media that he also won the popular vote in a big way, probably somewhere close to, you know, we're looking at maybe 70, maybe to 90,000 overall, but it could even go higher, because the mainstream media they did not want to report Michigan. They felt so like bad having to report Arizona. Now, you know, I could stand up here and say, you know, it really doesn't matter because all he needed was 270, you know, but it does matter. It does matter. Because there are millions and millions of people, and I will tell you that we have two big problems in this country, two huge problems. One is Hollywood, and one is right down the street here. Okay? We have two big problems. And you, young Americans, you're the ones that are going to have to figure out, because you have to fight for this country. You have to fight for this country. You can't sit back. You have a responsibility. You can't sit back. You're part of something special. You're here because you've made a decision about something in your life. Okay? You made a decision about something in your life. And it's really super important. Super important. But we cannot lose sight. We cannot lose sight of what our country was built upon. And we should not fear. We should not fear what our country is built upon. Our country was built upon the Judeo-Christian principles and values that make up our Constitution. And our country is about individual liberties. It's not about liberties for the government. It's about liberties for the individual rights. Just look at our Bill of Rights. It's all about individual rights. Right to bear arms, peaceably assemble, practice whatever religion you want, honestly. So it's individual rights. You have the right to go out here on the steps of Trump Tower and yell bad things about the next president or the current president. As long as you don't, do it in a damaging or hurtful way physically. I mean, we allow that, right? It's crazy, but we do it. It's individual rights. So that means you have the right to decide what you want to do. You have the right to decide what you want to do. So I will tell you that in the world of sort of digital media, because I think this is super important for you all, because it's going to change again. It's going to change. Now, I'll give you one example. We were on a Sunday afternoon, this is about a month ago, on a Sunday afternoon, we're in our third stop, and we're sitting there, and we're going to Colorado, the next stop, but we were going to go into Pueblo, Colorado. We ended up going into a place called Grand Junction. And because we had not been out into the western side of Colorado and all the stops. I don't know how many people in here from Colorado, but so we were saying, okay, we got to go out and sort of touch the people out in the west because it's very sparse in terms of populated area. And so Sunday afternoon, we're trying to figure out, well, we made some calls. How many people do you think will show up? What's the town we want to go into? We went into a place called Grand Junction. Okay, it has about, I think the population is about 5,000. So they said, well, maybe, we're going to get in there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Probably you'll talk at about 4, so maybe people will be out of, come out of work. Maybe there'll be a few kids that'll come out of school. So we said, how do we want to, so let's make some calls. Let's see what we want to do. So we got to, literally 30 minutes later, we think we're going to get about 2,000. So Trump said, let's go. It's worth it. We hadn't been out there. We have the time, and we're traveling. We're moving. So then we said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't you tweet out that you're going to be in Grand Junction, Colorado tomorrow, that you're going to arrive at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay? And that was about 4:30 the Sunday before the Monday that we showed up. 11,000 people showed up. 11,000. Yeah. 11,000 people showed up to a place, it's a beautiful little place in the middle of nowhere. I give you that example because we have many of those. And we have an army, okay, as a soldier and as a general, as a retired general. We have an army of digital soldiers. What we are now, I call them, because this was an insurgency, folks. This was run like an insurgency. This was irregular warfare at its finest in politics. And that story will continue to be told here. But we have what we call citizen journalists. Okay? Because the journalists that we have in our media did a disservice to themselves, actually more than they did to this country. They did a disservice to themselves because they displayed an arrogance that is unprecedented. And so the American people decided to take over the idea of information. They took over the idea of information, and they did it through social media. How many of you know about Periscope? Okay, raise your hands up. It's okay to raise your hands. I'm not going to ask you that question. I'm not going to give you a test question here. Yeah, okay, good. Periscope. I didn't know about Periscope till a few months ago. Didn't know about it. I watched one individual who will be nameless here, but one individual who has 650,000 followers just on Twitter, which really these days doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot. It's enough. This individual is a huge influencer. So we title him as an influencer. Okay? So he puts out a tweet to his 650,000 followers and says, I'm going to be on Periscope doing a live media broadcast in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. 35 million people viewed that. 35 million. Because everybody said, hey, because the guy's great. He's great. When he talks, he's out there. He's an American patriot. He's an American patriot. So when we talk about patriotism, how do we fight as patriots today? We fight at the voting booth. We fight in our schools. You know, in the military, when you're a young officer or sergeant, corporal, private, you know, we almost demand those individuals to demonstrate physical courage, to be fearless. Demonstrate physical courage. Why? We want them to do it on the physical exercise field. We want them to do it in the very physical, demanding extremes that we put them through on training, because we want them to demonstrate physical courage in the face of all odds on the battlefield. The more senior that you get, and I learned this, but actually I completely believe the opposite now for our younger generation. And it's the older you get in the military, we sort of begin to change that physical courage to what I call intellectual courage. And intellectual courage actually takes more bravery at times. Because to be intellectually courageous, and this is for you, this is really for this foundation, this is for the young people in this room, you are demonstrating a level of intellectual courage that our country desperately needs. So for this election, for this particular election, I'm going to be professional. I'm going to be humble, because I think that's a characteristic of the American, of the American patriot, is humility in the face of odds, right? A good winner, not a sore loser. But we don't have to be polite. In fact, we have to stop being polite for our principles. We have to stop being polite for our values. We have to stop being polite for what we stand for. We have to stop apologizing for who we are and what we believe. We cannot have that anymore. And that's you. So I'm looking and I'm trying to pierce through the lights that are in my eyes here and looking at the young people. I'll tell you two things that I learned from my parents. Both of them are deceased now. My father was a World War II and Korea veteran. My mom, wonderful, wonderful lady. She just died a year ago, a little over a year ago now. I'm one of 9 kids from a very small town up in Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island. And they taught us all two things. The thing that my father taught me was to treat the golden rule. The golden rule was what existed in our home. Treat others like you want to be treated. That's the golden rule. Treat others like you want to be treated. And if you do that, if you go through life, it's the old adage, by the time you're 10 years old, you've learned to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, thank you, please. All those little things, if you just use those words routinely, you will be highly successful in life with a few other traits that are brought out as you get older. But treat others like you like to be treated. And that's what he taught us. The thing that my mother taught us, because my mother was an educator. She got her law degree at the age of 69 years old. I mean, a phenomenal, and that's after having 9 children and moving around and all the kinds of things that you do. Because she was passionate about learning. And the idea, the notion to be a lifelong learner. Never stop learning. Never stop learning. Go to every single thing. Look, read, travel, pay close attention to what you're doing. I mean, I joke about this sometimes, and I say, because of my own sort of upbringing and my own, the fighting, as I'm in the middle of those 9. Fighting for a position, right? Fighting for a position. I'm the ultimate kind of, I could compromise. I could compromise somebody out of a pair of socks, So what I'm saying to you is that you have to think about what is it that you plan on doing in your life. And you'll find that there's a path out there that will have many, many exits. And you have to decide, do you stay on that course? And what is that course? Is that course something that is inherently part of your being? Is it you and your principles, you and your values, what your belief systems are? Because they will change. And there'll also be other life changes. Also be, many other life changes. So a couple of things, because I think that this is important on veterans. I'm going to talk because it's Veterans Day weekend. And, I'm not going to go without reminding people that if you watch the news today, we had 4 killed in action in Afghanistan. Today, 14 wounded. Numbers may go up a little bit in Bagram, Afghanistan. And my wife got a text from a very good friend of mine. When I was a brigade commander, he was a battalion commander of mine, Mark Costello, and his wife Barbara. My wife texts me with a message from his wife and says, "Hey, our son is serving at Bagram. Is there anything that you guys can find out?" I mean, because you don't know. And so we went back and gave her some guidance on. They called up the rear detachment, all this. Because they're very close. My wife and this gal Barbara are very close. Because it happened, it was big, and it was a large gathering. Her son is the commanding general's aide for the unit that's at Bagram. So there was an event, and in this case it was a running race that I guess that we do there fairly routinely. Well, her son was wounded this morning. Thank God he wasn't killed, but he was wounded. He was wounded pretty severely, and he'll probably recover. But he was wounded pretty severely. So, we must remind ourselves, we, the United States military, are in over 100 countries. Right now, we are engaged in direct combat in seven countries. So, on this Veterans Day weekend, as we reflect about what just happened in this country, we just went through a revolution. This is probably the biggest election in our nation's history since bringing on George Washington when he decided not to be a king. That's how important this is. You can compare this to Reagan, you can compare this to FDR, you can compare this to Teddy Roosevelt, you can compare this to Abraham Lincoln, but I'm telling you, there's no comparison. And the reason why I say that, and it's the reason why I'm standing here, the reason why I decided to do what I'm doing, because there is a sense in this country that we were going in a direction that was irreversible. It was irreversible. To the point of, it's cool, and you all know this. All of you that work, that mess around in these different college organizations so bravely, it's cool to be called progressive. Right? It's a cool word. I'm a progressive. Who doesn't want to be progressive? Right? It's a cool thing to be, right? Progressive is socialism. Progressive equals socialism. The riots and the protests that we have out on our streets tonight, last couple of nights, that's not Donald Trump's fault. Everybody's blaming Donald Trump. It's not Donald Trump's fault. That's the corruption in our government. That's the sickness in our system. That's the lack of jobs and safety and security in our inner cities. Those are the kinds of things that people are protesting about. Now, there's some paid anarchists in there. I can tell you that, I guarantee you, in fact, I know it for certain. And they'll be dealt with through our law enforcement system. And in law enforcement, we've had an assault on our law enforcement. We can't have an assault on our law enforcement. The biggest strategic advantage that our country has, more than any other country on the planet, is something called the rule of law. The rule of law. I've been on 6 continents, and I've been in some of the worst places that a human can go to, and seen some unbelievable things. The rule of law can never break down in this country. It must never break down in this country, to a point where people begin to wonder, is what's going on here, and getting concerned. And when you don't have leadership, that stands up and says, hey, this is wrong, stop it. And here's what we need to do. We have, and we experienced, an incredible deficit of leadership. In my first meeting with Donald Trump, because I'll tell you, for me personally, the last time I was involved in politics was when I was in high school. It's like somebody said, hey, you want to run for student class, president, because nobody else wants to in the elections today. Okay. And you got to go handle like the Coca-Cola machine money or something, Seriously. And I find myself here today because we have a country that I know what this country's about. I know the threats that we face. And there's people that think, oh, there's nobody out there that wants to see our way of life go away. Oh, there's plenty of people. There's entire nation states that do not appreciate the American way of life. And that's why we have to fight for it. We have to fight for it. We find ourselves fighting for it more right here at home, sometimes, and especially in this political cycle, this political madness that we've gone through. But I've seen it. I've seen it now for probably the last 2 decades of my life. And for me personally, I felt something, and that drove me to challenge. In the intelligence business, it's always truth to power. So you're always sort of challenging you're always sort of bucking the system because, nobody wants to see you because it's never good news. Nobody wants to see you, but I'm standing there, I get a call and asked to come up to New York to see Donald Trump. This is like, summer of 2015. And we met, just a wonderful individual, just an incredibly wonderful person, loves this country. And sitting down with him, and I really only had 2 questions that I wanted to ask, and then we talked about the world situation and a whole bunch of other things. We spent a couple hours that day. And my first question was, are you serious? Because I'm a serious guy, and I'm not going to waste my time if you're not serious. And so he convinced me that he was serious. He said, yeah, I'm absolutely serious. I've been paying very close attention to what's going on, and I can't, for me, him, speaking about him, for me, this is sort of my last chance if I think I'm going to help this country. Because the second question really had to do with that. Second question was, which I think is the most difficult question to answer. And it was never asked in any of the debates. Chris Wallace kind of touched on it at the very end. But this is the most difficult question. And the question is, why do you want to be president? Why do you want to be president? And he convinced me in about 5 minutes how much he loved this country, how much he saw what was happening to it, and how much he felt like he actually could do something about it. And that, to me, I was sold. I'm like, wow. And sort of from that moment on, my direction in life completely changed. And things like that are going to happen, particularly for the young folks in the room here. I'm going to stop here in a second because I know we're going to try to take a few questions here tonight because I was asked to maybe answer some questions from some of the young folks here. But you know this, and all the older folks here know that your life direction will change and could change on a dime sometimes. You know, it will change. And so what I ask you to do is reflect on what just occurred. Study it, think about it, talk about it, debate about it, act on it. You know, one of the things that Abraham Lincoln always used to say was, actions speak louder than words. You know, and I think the Gettysburg Address, amazing. I think it was 85 words in 2 minutes. Wasn't even really recorded at the time, other than what they had in his notebook. It wasn't until a couple of years later where people started to go, whoa, look at this thing. Where he talks about, you know, let us not forget, and he discusses and describes the sacrifice, in this case, talking about the Battle of Gettysburg, where he talks about Americans who gave the last full measure of devotion on behalf of our country, on behalf of the United States of America at that time. Amazing resilience, amazing toughness. Not anger, determination. Determined to protect what it is that we have. And so I believe, this foundation, what you represent, so for the sponsors that are here, I thank you so much for, you know, continuing to kind of strengthen this great idea. But for the young people that are here, you know, this is, you have to fight for what you believe in. You have to be prepared to fight for what you believe in. And you have to serve. You have to serve. You decide how you want to serve our country, whether it's in uniform or whether it's in some other capacity. Doesn't matter. Serve this nation. Serve it bravely. Serve it boldly. Serve it honestly. If you want credibility, others will give you credibility. If you want credibility, maintain your integrity. Protect your integrity. People will give you credibility. You have to give yourself integrity. So on that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and I'll answer a few questions. Okay, that's right. That's right. Thank you very much. Oh, that's okay.